Hi, it's Steph from Scent from Heaven. Before I make the soap from the lye water that I made in my last video, I thought I might go over some soaping terminology so that if you're going on any other soap videos or if you're going into any soap forums on Facebook or anything like that, you might understand a little bit more of the terminology. So the first one I want to go over is saponification. So this is the entire reason that we have soap. So this is the chemical process that the lye goes through when it comes into contact with the oils, and then it goes through this chemical process and turns it into soap. So the amount of lye that we need in each recipe differs completely depending on the different oils and butters that you use, because every different oil and butter has a different sap value or saponification value. So it is really important that we use a soap calculator when we are formulating a recipe so that we have the value of lye that is needed in order to turn our oils into our soap. So soap calculators are so important. I cannot stress this enough, how important it is to run every single recipe that you come across through a soap calculator. Whether it be one that you find online or whether it be one that you have in a book, printing errors can occur, people can have typos when they're making websites. Even the one that I'm going to post in the show notes, please run everything through a soap calculator. It doesn't matter what calculator you are using, it is still important to run everything through there so that you end up with a safe soap. Now as far as safety concerns, because it is a safety concern, if you have the incorrect amount of lye to your oils and butters, you can end up with a lye heavy soap. Now this can cause skin irritation and burns. So it is really important that you run everything through that calculator so that you're not harming yourself or your family. So while I'm on the topic of soap calculators, there's something called a super fat in our soap calculator. So I make cold processed soaps. All of my soaps have a super fat of around 5%, 5 to 7%. So the super fat is the amount of oils left over in your recipe that haven't been converted to soap by the lye. So these oils and butters that are left over will add the qualities that they had prior to being soap into your recipe. So with cold process, generally you don't get to pick what your super fat is going to be. It's just randomly taken out from the soap by the lye. I believe with hot process, I don't do hot process, but I believe with hot process you can actually pick what you want to be your super fat and you can add it in after the cook. So during the process of making your soap, there is going to be something called emulsion. So this is when all your ingredients are just combined, they're all intertwined and mixed together, but they haven't actually come to a trace. Now, a trace is when the soap is completely combined, and when you pick up your stick blender, and you'll often just do this over the top, so you're just shaking it over the top of the batter, it will leave what's called trailings behind. Now these trailings will tell you when your soap has come to a trace and when it is generally safe to add additives. So depending on the strength of your trace, whether it be just an emulsion, medium, light or heavy trace. So a medium trace is generally when you can add things like oats, poppy seeds, anything that you want suspended in the soap. It's generally safe to add things at medium trace. I try to normally get my soap to a light trace before I get it into the batter, because it makes it easier when I want to tap it down on the bench to release any air bubbles. Ricing is something that can happen during your soap making. So this is normally something that happens after you add a fragrance oil or an essential oil. And what happens is something that is in the ingredients of the essential oil or the fragrance oil that is added binds to the harder oils of the soap and creates lumps. Now, these lumps can generally be blended out with your stick blender until it is smooth. However, you do run the risk of getting to quite a heavy trace to the point where you need to spoon your mixture into the mold. So be very careful when you have that sort of trace. So soda ash. This is when unsaponified lye reacts with the carbon dioxide in our air. So it can make a ashy look on the top of the soap. It can even get into the ridges. Sometimes it can look quite thick. It is still safe to use. It's purely cosmetic. It can be washed off and can be prevented by covering your soap and spraying with isopropyl alcohol. It can also be prevented by using less water. However, if you're a beginner, I would recommend not using any sort of water discounts in your soap. Just until you learn the basics of how to make your soap and what to look for in trace, because with less water it can come to trace faster. There's also something called gel phase, and by forcing a gel phase you can also prevent soda ash. A gel phase is one of the stages that soap can go through. Some people force gel phase by putting their soap on a heating mat or in a preheated oven. You can also prevent this, if your soap has things with high amounts of sugar in it, whether it be fruit purees or milks. These sorts of things you would probably put into the fridge or freezer to avoid it getting too hot. So when we add our lye to our oils and start the saponification process, our soap actually starts to heat up again, just like our lye water did. So the soap can get to about 80 degrees or so. I generally soap at room temperature, and it will reach probably maybe around 70 degrees. Now, I generally don't put my soaps through gel phase. I also don't prevent it. I just leave it on the counter, and if it goes through gel phase or not, it just depends. It can make colors pop a bit more. So if you're using a lot of micas and things like that and you want really vibrant colors, I would suggest trying to do a gel phase. But just be very careful about it because it does get very hot. You're prone to something called volcanoes. So volcanoes caused by overheating. So as I said, recipes that contain things like fruit purees, milks, alcohols, any extra sugars, honey, those sorts of things are all at risk of having a volcano. So that's when the soap it generally puffs up a lot. It may spit out of the mold, it may overflow. Those sorts of things are called volcanoes. And yeah, it just happens because the soap has heated up a lot, and it just needs to, it's releasing like gases, and these gases need to be released somehow. It just makes it really puffy. If you want to prevent it, as I said, just put things in the fridge or freezer. So dreaded orange spots, otherwise goes by DOS. This is caused by using rancid oils or things that are just past their shelf life. So it can be avoided. Obviously, don't use old oils. It is purely cosmetic. It is still safe to use, so if you just happen to be using just whatever's left in your pantry, something that you haven't used in a long time and you thought you just want to use it, you can, but just be aware that you may end up with these dreaded orange spots. Thankfully, I have not had it happen to me, but I have seen plenty of photos on the soap forums online of people having these. So I think that about covers everything. I just want to mention that try and read up on some of the oil properties before you start making soap, because things that you may think about maybe moisturizing, say a main one is coconut oil. So when you use coconut oil outside of soap, it is generally considered to be moisturizing. People will use it on their hair and on their skin and say that it makes their skin feel amazing. However, in soap, coconut oil becomes very drying. It strips all the skin of its natural oils. So what you sort of want to avoid is, again, causing irritation on yourself or your family's skin. So I would recommend just reading up on the properties of the oils and how they are in soap. So look at things like coconut oil. Olive oil is the main one that I find a lot of people use in soap, and it is probably one of the easiest to come by oils that you can use. I like to use cocoa butter, shea butter. I also have used mango butter. That's another lovely one. So just have a little read of oils and their properties once they are in soap before you start making things. When you're on a soap calculator, it should also, I know that I use something called Soap Calc, and on Soap Calc, once you calculate the recipe and you view it, it actually comes up with a list on the left side of the screen down the bottom that says a cleansing number, so how stripping it is going to be your skin. And it has some like a little bar that has a range. It has a range that you want to stick between to get like an ideal type of soap. So it has cleansing and bubbly and a few other things on it. So just have a little play around before you start making anything, just to see what you like, see if you can get things in between the ranges. Bubbly is can be given by using castor oil. So just have a look and see what you like in there before you dive into making soaps. Alright, so I'm going to post the video as well of me making the soap with the live water, so I will put that on right after this. Alright, so it's time to make our soap. So what I've got here in this bucket here is all my pre-measured oils. So I put all my liquid oils in, I melt down all of my solid oils, and then I just put them all into this bucket. Now we measure everything by weight, not by mils. So that's all in the bucket there, ready to go. I'll go over some of the other things I have here. So I've got my little silicone spatula. I have my mixer here, my handheld blender. So that one I just got from Kmart. It's only costs maybe $10–15 or so, just a little cheapie. It works really well. I have got my loaf mold here. So that loaf mold I got from Amazon, very cheap. I think it cost only maybe $30 or so, and I got 3 of them. I have another little cavity mold here, just for any extra that goes over the top of our loaf mold. I think that was another maybe $10 or so from Kmart. I have, sorry, no, not from Kmart, from Amazon. I also have a little mica here. Just going to use a little candy pink mica, only just a little bit, just to colour the soap slightly. I got that one from Aussie Soap Supplies. And I also have a fragrance oil here. It's Lychee Guava fragrance oil, Lychee Guava Sorbet, and I got that one from Eroma. The max usage on that one is 2%. So in my little measuring cup here, I weighed, it's maximum of 20 grams. I used 19 because I was not able to get to 20. I reckon if I poured any more, I would have ended up with it everywhere and I would have been way over. So I don't want that. Now, as usual, I am wearing my goggles. I have got an apron on. I have my long sleeves. We no longer need our masks because the lye has finished with the fumes now, so we don't need that anymore. However, we do need our gloves because we are working with lye. So I'll put them on. Not going to do anything too fancy this time, just because while we're working on basics, just want to do things nice and easy. So I've plugged in my stick blender. I've made sure that all of my oils here are mixed together. There's no hard lumps or anything like that. So what we're gonna do is I'm just gonna double check that I'm all ready here. I've got my little bucket of lye. Now I said I was gonna put a little lid on that one, so that one's been hanging around my kitchen. So I'm just gonna take the lid off that one. Now, as I said, there's no more fumes coming from that one anymore. So there's just a clear liquid now. So I'm going to first put that one off to the side, put my hand blender in, and I'm just going to give it a little shake because it has little bubbles that are sitting from the air from underneath the blender. So I just give it a little wiggle just to try and get as much of that air out as I possibly can, and I stand it on the side. When my blender is running, I will not be talking because it is a bit loud, so you won't be able to hear anything I'm saying. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour it over the side of my blender so that it doesn't splash up. I'm just going to pour that in slowly. And what I'm going to be doing is blending to emulsion, not trace. So I'll give it a quick little stir first with just the blender, not turning it on, and then I'll give it a couple of quick bursts. So now you can see that with the lye in there, the color of the oils has changed. So that's now turned more sort of like a yellowy sort of color, really not see-through anymore like our oils were. So what we're looking for is our trace. So can't see anything on the top there. Just keep stirring. I'm going to give it another couple of quick bursts. Okay, keep stirring. You can see in there. And I'll check. No trace yet. So this is what we would call emulsified. I just want to have a light trace before I go doing anything too much. I will, however, think it might be time to put our mica in. So I'm going to get my little measuring spoons here, and I'm just going to get a little, I think that's a quarter teaspoon, and I'll just put it in there, and I'll give it a little stir, quick little burst. So it's sort of changing color a little bit now, and you probably, there is a very, very light trace on the top here, but I've still got little bits of mica floating around in there. Oh, now see, that's exactly why I wear my goggles, because when I put this back in there, I had some of the soap batter flick back up. I'm gonna give it another couple of quick little bursts. Just burp it first, get those bubbles out. Give it a stir. So you've still got little bits of mica in there. Sometimes, most of the time, I will mix it with my fragrance oil or some of my batter oil prior to adding it into here, and I didn't do it this time and now I'm regretting it. So what I've got now probably could be considered about a medium trace. You can see the batter sort of forming lines on the top there. So this is probably almost ready to go into our mold, but what I need to do is I've got to add my fragrance oil. My fragrance oil, I've never actually used this one before, so it might be a bit of a bit risky. So fragrance oils can make it accelerate or can rice it. So hopefully that doesn't do that to us today. All right, so in we go with that. Now mix, 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 mix. No ricing yet, thankfully. Now I'm going to give it a couple of quick little bursts. And I am getting to a very thick trace now. So I need to put this into my mold ASAP. Just move this over here. Put that aside. Now, here's my loaf mold, and I'm going to pour that in there. Ooh, I'm getting a bit far out there. Yeah. Now, this is over halfway, but normally about halfway I'll give it a bit of a tap, wiggle, just to try and bring up any air bubbles that might have been trapped in there, because I do have a thick trace, so I probably will end up with air bubbles. So I'll just keep pouring that. Now, if I didn't know this was soap, I'd probably say that that might taste good, but obviously it's soap. Let's not eat it. Now I'm just going to grab my little spatula here, and I'm going to scrape the walls of my bucket to try and get as much of that soap out as I can, and I'm going to pour that in there. That's not all of it, but that's all I'm going to put in that one for now. And I'm just going to grab my little cavity mold here. Now, because my cavity mold is silicone, I will try to tap it, but it won't work as well as my wood lined mold. So I really like my wood lined loaf mold. Some people have just silicone ones, but they normally have to prop the sides of them because they bow out. So I really like my wood lined one, and I know quite a few soapers, at least that I've seen on Facebook, also have the wood lined molds, and they really like them as well. So I think that's one of the ones that you come across most. And I will try and put in my show notes along with a recipe, just where I've gotten all of my oils and things from. So obviously most of the oils, they're very similar to cooking oils, so I'll often get most of my oils just at Woolworths when I'm doing my weekly shop, just to soften the blow a little bit. Otherwise, I would be spending hundreds of dollars elsewhere. Now, I've just filled just a couple of cavity molds off the side there, so I'll just try to, no, too thick, not gonna work. So I'll just put that off the side there, and I've got my loaf mold here. Now, once it's in the mold, especially with my thick trace that I ended up getting, you can sort of start to, like, it'll hold form quite well. So you can move it about, you can do any sort of designs that you want on the top. So you can, you know, dig in here and create something on the side there. I don't recommend using botanicals because they will turn brown. Most of them will turn brown and go moldy, and they will clog drains and things like that. So I don't recommend it. However, if you're just using it for yourself and your family members, as long as you warn them that there is the risk that it might cause an issue with their drain, then go ahead. So just smoothing down one side, and then I'm gonna peek that side up. To have to just go along with my finger on the side here and wipe it on my apron. Thank goodness for aprons. Just clean up those edges a little bit. And most of the rest of that will come off when it is dry. So I will come back when this has set, normally around 24 to 48 hours. I think my recipe here normally takes around 24 hours to be enough to like solid enough for me to take out of my mold. So that is my finished product in my soap mold. So I will see you again when we go to cut.